this. Or Tony Millette. My name is Dwight Bland, and I am from Norfolk State University in the campus ministry. And I represent the gold side.
Green side! Gold side!
Alright. Not this morning. But yeah, I've come here to bring you guys the word this morning. So last week we had our church-wide worship service, and Ed gave a really convicting lesson about Stephen and how he was literally in front of the Sanhedrin, and he spoke boldly in front of them, and he was stoned, for the sake of the gospel. And that really convicted me, because he was like, man, like this guy was unashamed, like he was literally standing in front of all of his superheroes, and he literally spoke boldly about the gospel, and he called them out. He basically called them on their bluff, and they got mad, and they were like, who is this guy? He's a regular guy, like, we're the teachers of the law, but this regular person is coming here telling me how to preach the law that I have given my life to. That was really convicting for me. So this morning, we're coming out of Acts 8, verses 1 through 8. So if you have your Bibles, can you turn to Acts chapter 8, verses 1 through 8. And Acts 8, chapter 8, verses 1 through 8 reads, and it says, and Saul approved of their killing him. On that day, a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. Godly men buried Stephen and mourned deeply for him. Stephen and mourned deeply for him, not Stephen. But Saul began to destroy the church. Going from house to house, he dragged off men and women and put them in prison. Those who had been scattered preached the word wherever they went. Philip went into the city in Samaria and proclaimed the Messiah there. When the crowds heard Philip and saw the signs he performed, they all paid close attention to what he said. For with shrieks and impure spirits came out of many, and many were paralyzed or lame were healed. So there was great joy in that city. So this morning, I want to preach on persecution.
Come on.
So, like I said last week, Ed gave a convicting lesson about Stephen. Stephen was persecuted by the Sanhedrin and literally stoned. And Saul, who we later learn is converted into Paul, who Jesus meets, and now he's like the number one guy that writes pretty much the rest of the New Testament. He approved of killing Stephen. And after that, great persecution broke out in the church. So it's like through persecution, the gospel spreads through Judea and Samaria. And the Holy Spirit works through Philip to spread the word. So what's the message here? What's the heart of this? What is the clearest application of what we are reading this morning? Simply put, God uses adversity to spread his church.
Amen.
Now you think about adversity in your life. The most common thing that comes to mind are family deaths, a tragedy, a freak accident, or illnesses. Now, these are all common things that we use to advance the gospel. We'll send a person who's experiencing a family death, like scriptures of encouragement, like, hey, bro, I know you're going through this time, but, God comforts the brokenhearted, Or you were in an accident, like, the Lord will heal you, most definitely. Even if he doesn't heal you in the way that you want to be healed, like God can still be glorified. But do we really think about the gospel being spread through persecution? When you are persecuted. I know for me, the thoughts that come to my mind are like maybe, if I'm spreading the gospel on campus, I go to Norfolk State, so I'm surrounded by a bunch of people who are trying to figure out their lives. They're in the middle of, hey, I'm in college, and now the world tells me I have to figure it out when I'm here. And through that process, it's pretty stressful because you're pretty young, and literally you can do whatever you want, and whatever you do at that given moment in time, it doesn't really count until later on, And people make life-changing decisions when they're in their 20s, or they're in college, or whether you're not in college, or you're in the military, or whatever the case may be, but that's like a prime time. And the first thoughts that come to my mind, if somebody denies me, or I'm sharing my faith, or I'm in the student union preaching the gospel. Like we had some campus swappers come from Ohio, and they were spreading the gospel in the student union. And literally our student activities coordinator was like, you guys can't be here, like you need to leave. And I didn't know of it, but the lady, she was like, some of the people that were sharing, they were like, yeah, we know Dwight. And we're having a Bible discussion in Brown Hall. That's one of the buildings at Norfolk State. And she was like, oh, I know him. And we're trying to become an organization on campus. And we were like, that might hurt your chances of becoming an organization on campus. And the first thing that came to my mind was like, dang, like this has been a prayer for forever. And we're so close. And now just because we're sharing our faith, we might lose out on this opportunity. I didn't think about the gospel being spread through persecution. But in retrospect, it's like we're getting in trouble for what we're supposed to do as followers of Christ.
Amen.
So I'm like, you know what? Matt was like, man, whether we become an organization or not, like the gospel is still going to spread. I'm like, Matt, you know what? Amen. You're right. Like whether we haven't been an organization at all since until now. Hopefully by the end of the year we will become an org. But still, it's like we've been still baptizing and changing people's lives.
Yeah.
So it's gonna happen whether or not we become an organization. So,
Amen.
but I just want to encourage you, like, think about what comes to your mind when you're being persecuted.
Amen.
Do you think, man, maybe the world is right? Maybe what I believe in is fake. Maybe what I believe in is stupid. I pray to a person that I can't even see. I put my hopes and my dreams into something that is not feasible, something that doesn't respond to me instantly. We think about relationships and people, like, people, they respond instantly. God doesn't. Like, you might pray for something now, and it won't be answered, like, 10 years later. Like, I prayed for a relationship with God when I was in high school. It didn't happen until, like, 2 years later. So it's just like, man, maybe what I believe in isn't real, because I'm getting persecuted, or because people are looking at me a certain way, or saying that I'm wrong, or, they're saying that I shouldn't believe this. Or maybe it's your lack of compassion for the lost. When you reach out to somebody and they're like, nah, I'm not really with it. I don't really want to follow Jesus. I'm kind of doing my own thing. Or I grew up in church. I know Jesus. But it's like when you ask them questions, they can't really explain their relationship, the depth of their relationship, and they don't know. So you just lose compassion because they say no. It's like, all right, you know what? I'll just move on to the next one.
Come on, Dwight.
Or maybe you think this isn't worth the humiliation and mockery. People call me a Jesus freak. Oh wow, I don't want to go around looking like a Jesus freak. Like you're on the job or you're in class. And the job requires, like, hey, like, you're not supposed to talk about Jesus in the workplace because it will cause adversity. Well, it's like, my God came to cause adversity. Like, literally in Matthew chapter 10, verses 32 through 36, it says, Jesus says, whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven.
Yeah.
But whoever disowns me before others, I will disown before my Father in heaven. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's enemies will be members of his own household. Wow. I don't know about you guys, but when I read that, I was like, man, Jesus came to bring trouble.
Yeah.
You think of Jesus being like all this peaceful figure and like, oh, like he's soft and all this other stuff? No. Like the guy died. Like seriously. Like you think somebody who's not willing to face humiliation. He was spit on.
Yeah.
He was mocked. After he was already beaten up and tired and exhausted and depressed. Why was he depressed? Because of your sin. Because he was separated from God.
Come on, Dwight.
So do you think about the gospel being spread through persecution? Jesus was persecuted. Stephen, he's not even Jesus. He got stoned, literally, for preaching the gospel in front of the people who said, hey, like, I know the law. They literally devoted their lives, like, since they were young, to learn the scriptures, forward and backwards, in all the languages. They knew everything. They had scrolls. They had robes. They were fancy.
Mercy.
But literally, they knew nothing about God.
Yeah.
But yet, he stood in front of all of them and told them, hey, like, you guys are stiff-necked. You guys are stiff-necked believers. You actually don't even believe. Like, you do all these things for the glory of yourselves, but not for the glory of God. Do you really think about persecution? God's gospel being spread through persecution. So my first and only point this morning is God uses persecution to spread his church.
Come on.
God uses persecution to spread his church. In Acts 1:1, the Holy Spirit comes on to the people to spread the gospel. And even in Acts 1:8, it says great persecution broke out to the church, and all except the apostles were scattered through Judea and Samaria. Godly men buried Stephen and mourned deeply for him. But Saul began to destroy the church, going from house to house. He dragged them off, men and women put in prison. But in the next verse it says, those who were scattered preached the word wherever they went.
Amen.
You guys gotta realize, like, persecution is beneficial for the spread of the gospel. If it wasn't for persecution, the gospel would still be in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
You have to really think about that. Like, persecution spreads the gospel. Just because you reach out to that one coworker and he's like, nah, doesn't mean that you can't reach out to your boss, who literally oversees everyone in the whole company and becomes a disciple and literally flips the whole company upside down. You don't think about that. You just think about how you look and the comments that your coworkers make on their lunch break or in the break room. You know, on campus, in your classes. You're like, man, I don't want to invite everybody out to Bible talk. I'm going to look like a fool. But it's like, do you not realize that the one thing that you hold in the relationship that you have has changed your life? Every day, your life has changed in some way, shape, or form. God is exposing you. He's growing you into mature young men and women. But do you think about the persecution that you face? Do you see it being beneficial for the spread of the gospel? Stephen was the first martyr, was literally one of the first martyrs. He was stoned. And in verse, it says that Paul put these people in prison. Saul put these people in prison. And you gotta think about it, later on, Paul was put in prison for spreading the gospel. I believe in chapter 28, it leaves off like a cliffhanger. It doesn't say how Paul dies. It just says that the gospel was being spread. He was locked up, but yet he changed all of the guards that were surrounding him. He still preached the gospel when he was in chains. So it's what happened back then in the first century church. Does that reflect to what's happening today?
Great question.
We call ourselves devout followers of Christ, but are we really doing what Christ did? Are we really putting our lives on the line for his sake? He says, deny yourself, pick up your cross, and follow him. You guys understand that picking up your cross back then literally meant be willing to die for me. The cross wasn't something that was just oh, this is something simple. No, the cross meant death, public humiliation. People hang on crosses. They literally put people on crosses in the towns to show them, hey, if you do this, this is what's going to happen to you. If you rebel, or if you murder, or if you cause an uprising in the city, this is what's going to happen to you. This is your punishment. Do you think about picking up your cross today? How does this apply to me today? I'm not going to get killed. Well, thank God, you live in a country where you're not put at gunpoint for believing in what you believe in. But some of our brothers and sisters in India, in China, Japan, they literally have to go underground to praise God and worship God. They literally get persecuted day in and day out, putting their lives on the line for the sake of the gospel. It still applies today. That is your cross. But your cross today is probably humiliation. Your persona, how you look. Do you look cool? Do you appeal to your coworkers? Do you appeal to your classmates? Do you appeal to your classmates in high school? You want to fit into all the cool crowds and you don't want to look like a Jesus freak. Well, it's yo, Jesus was a freak.
Great point.
Again, the guy died for you and your sin.
Come on, Dwight.
Think about it. And it's convicting for me too, because it's like, man, like I've been a follower of Christ for literally 4 years, going on 4 years. I can honestly say I've been following Christ for almost 4 years of my life. And some of the efforts that I've made to follow Jesus, I'm like, man, like I could have definitely shared with my class. I could have definitely reached out to all these people. Like I'm a science major. Like science and religion like clash for some odd reason. It makes no sense, honestly, when you really think about it. Like they actually coincide. They make sense, you know. But people literally devote their lives to make something up into believing that, nah, this supernatural being doesn't exist. You know? It's like, well, where did you come from?
Okay.
So you think all these atoms and all these molecules clashed together and somehow made your brain? Something that you are still striving and fighting to understand, that you will never understand.
That's right.
Literally pouring years and years, devoting their lives to research to find out the answers. When the answer is God.
Yes.
He created you. Why can't you just come to the conclusion that, man did not make himself. God made man.
Amen.
But people devote their lives to stuff like this. People in my field. But it's like, do I have the guts to stand up for my God? Because I know what I know. Sometimes I'm like, nah, I don't. Because I don't feel like arguing. I just really don't. But it's like, am I devoted to my God or am I devoted to these people?
Right. Come on.
And ask yourself that question, like, do you fear people or do you fear God?
Come on, Dwight.
Like Cain read earlier in Romans 8, like God is for us. Who could be against us?
Yeah.
Like your God is for you. You realize that the God not only made you, but he made the people sitting right next to you. He made all these complex things that humans will never, ever understand. They will devote their lives and they will waste their time trying to figure out how things are made.
Come on. It's true.
Your God is for you, but are you willing to face that humiliation?
Come on.
The image of you being destroyed, your ego being altered. I know for me, like, it's heart-wrenching because I want to look a certain way.
Yeah.
I want to feel a certain way,
That's
you know? I go to HBCU, so image is everything. And it's really sad that image is everything. If you walk on my campus for 5 minutes, you will see that it is a fashion show. Like, man, I might be a little underdressed today. And then literally, people will be looking at you like, what is he wearing? What is she wearing? I think we literally have a devout time on Friday for 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours, every Friday in the student union. It's called activity hour. You want to know what happens in activity hour? No activities. It's literally just a bunch of people standing around on their phones, looking at each other, or on Snapchat, or on Instagram, or doing whatever, or on Facebook Live, just recording. Or just looking at their phones. And looking at each other and judging each other. And I guarantee you, more than $1 million is standing in that one spot for 2.5 hours. People have devoted their lives to looking good. But do I have the audacity to go in there and cause trouble?
Come on, Dwight.
I don't, because it's sinful, to be honest. It's wild. But still, it's just like, am I really going to face humiliation? What happens in these 2.5 hours? A bunch of fraternities and sororities, all they're doing is strolling, and it's like, strolling is basically like dancing. You know, it's like they do their own types of dances. That's literally all that happens. That is the only activity that is happening. Everybody else, if you're not in an organization, you're standing, just looking around. It's like, man, do I fear these people or do I fear my God? Am I going to go in here and pull out 2 or 3 people that are just standing there, wanting to look good, wanting to feel something? They're searching for something. All these people are searching for something. And they're searching for God. They just don't know it.
Come on, preach the word, brother.
So when trouble comes, and by trouble I mean when persecution comes your way, do you lose faith in the gospel that you preach? Like, faith is what got you to where you're at now. Have you lost faith when somebody says, no, I don't want to study the Bible? Have you lost faith when your coworker keeps bashing you and telling all your other coworkers, like, yo, don't talk to him, or don't talk to her, because she's going to just talk about Jesus. She's going to fill your head up with a bunch of mumbo-jumbo, and it just makes no sense. Literally in Hebrews 11, verse 6, it says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. Because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists, and he rewards those who earnestly seek him. These people back then in Acts 8, in the first century church, they were locked up. They were dragged out of their houses, men and women, and thrown in jail. And they still spread the gospel. If it weren't for them still spreading the gospel through persecution, you probably wouldn't be here. You probably wouldn't hear about Jesus. You wouldn't know about Jesus. Does what happened back then apply to today? Are you applying it to your life? You're reading about it every day, but are you doing it?
Yeah, Christian.
These people, their faith was reckless, regardless of what they went through. And their obedience to the mission wasn't based on their situation. They simply obeyed Jesus' command. My question to you is your obedience to God's situation? If things are going good and people are studying the Bible and you're reaching out and you're on a roll, like, yeah, God, I'll obey. But when you're getting wrecked every day for sharing your faith, like some of the men, they went out and preached the gospel at the new, in the Norfolk outlets. And the police officer came up to them. And you want to know what one of the guys did? He wrote on a card and was like, hey, you should come out to church. Do you have the shameless audacity? Do you have the faith to go out and preach the gospel when things get hard? That's obedience. God commanded you as a follower of Christ to spread the gospel to all nations.
Yeah.
Teaching them to obey the commands that he taught you.
Yep.
And know that he will be with you every single day. Every denial, every victory, every person that you reached out to, you planted the seed. It's not your job to grow it. It's your job to watch it grow.
That's right.
So I have a final question. If persecution is what spreads the gospel, is the gospel that you spread on a day-to-day basis worth being persecuted? Are you living out the gospel that you profess? Because if it's not worth being persecuted, then you're not living out the gospel. Because these people, they got persecuted. We should be getting persecuted.
Right.
But the even bigger question is, do you find any joy in being persecuted? Do you see the glories of being persecuted at all?
Wow.
That's my point, and now I'm going to have my brother Reese come up and follow up.
How's it going, guys? I really appreciate what Dwight had to share about what persecution produces and about how it produces the spread of the gospel. We're going to take a look at really a shining example of that for the rest of the sermon. And we're going to look a little bit at like what motivated him to do what he did. So you guys can go ahead and turn back to Acts 8. And while you're doing that, I'm going to tell a story, tell you a little bit about myself. So right now, I am a junior at Old Dominion University. I'm studying mechanical engineering. And when I was younger, I wanted to play NFL football. You can probably tell how that went. Not very well, right? So, let me set the stage for you. I was in 5th grade. I had never played a game of football in my life at that point. Not a game of tackle football, but I knew I wanted to be an NFL player. I remember our counselors were trying to help us figure out what we wanted to do. I mean, we were in 5th grade, so it's like, what is that? But I remember her telling me, she's like, well, you know, it's very hard to become a football player. You know, it doesn't happen to a lot of people. You have to put a lot of work in, a lot of practice, yada, yada, yada. And I remember being like, nah, I'm going to be in the NFL, and I'm going to be laughing at you. And so I started playing football. I enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun. And what slowly began to come clear to me is that I was not cut out. I had a lot of fun doing it. I put in a lot of time and effort too. I went to speed training. I spent hours and hours practicing, looking at plays, looking at a bunch of different stuff. working on my tackle reform, and I just couldn't do it. I was not cut out for it. I couldn't even, when I got to high school, I couldn't even start on my high school football team. Like, I wanted to be in the NFL, I couldn't even start on my high school football team. And I think what it kind of goes to show is, like, genetically, I'm not cut out to do it. And the bottom line is, like, even if I worked my tail end off, I don't think I would have been able to do it.
Yeah.
And amen, since then, I don't want to do it anymore. I gave up on that my freshman year of high school. So, but I think right there we see, you know, my passion and my drive and whatever, it didn't equal results for me. I didn't have the ability to do it. It wasn't going to happen. So we're going to take a look at somebody who kind of like me, he had the odds stacked against him, but it turned out a little bit differently. So go to Acts 8. We're going to read starting in verse 4. In verse 4 it says, "Therefore, those who had been scattered went about preaching the word. Philip went down to the city of Samaria and began proclaiming Christ to them. The crowds with one accord were giving attention to what was said by Philip, as they heard and saw the signs which he was performing. For in the case of many who had unclean spirits, they were coming out of them, shouting with a loud voice, and many who had been paralyzed and lame were healed. So there was much rejoicing in the city." And I want to provide a little bit of context here. So, you know, Philip is coming from, he's fleeing from a great persecution. Just like, you know, Dwight shared, these people were scattered because of the persecution. And it was heavy and hard. People were being tossed in prison. Stephen had just died. I mean, that's a terrifying experience. And where does Philip go? He goes to Samaria. And basically, for those of you guys who don't know, what Samaria was, it was people of Jewish descent lived in Samaria. But the Jews hated the Samaritans. And the reason they hated the Samaritans is because the Samaritans' ancestors, they disobeyed God. They married foreigners, and they, you know, worshipped other gods and did that sort of thing. And so the Jews, you know, kind of stood on their high horse and they looked down on the Samaritans. It was basically racist. Like, they really hated the Samaritans. And it changes the phrase Good Samaritan a little bit, you can talk about it later. But, yeah, Philip came from this Jewish background, and his family probably hated the Samaritans. All of his brothers and sisters hated the Samaritans. And this is where he ended up coming, right? But it says that he preached the gospel anyway. And it's interesting because why in the world would a man like Philip, who's fleeing a great persecution, is probably scared for his life, is going to a place where his brothers and sisters consider people to be degenerates, and yet he still shares the gospel? Why does he do that? And I think if we take a look at 2 Corinthians 5, it can help us see a little bit of that. So guys,
Come on, Reese.
So we're going to start in verse 14. So in verse 14 it says, "For the love of Christ controls us, having concluded this, that one died for all, therefore all died, and he died for all, so that they who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who died and rose again on their behalf. Therefore, from now on, we recognize no one according to the flesh. Even though we have known Christ according to the flesh, yet now we know him in this way no longer." And the main points that stand out, I think, to me in the scripture at least, is the first thing it says is the love of Christ controls us. And as a result of this, we don't regard anybody by the flesh anymore.
Right.
We don't see people, you know, the way we see them in the world.
Yeah.
And I think it's a huge temptation for me. I mean, I'm on campus. I know a lot of people are jobs and stuff like that, but I walk around literally thousands of people each day. And I don't know them. I don't recognize them. Anything like that. So it's really easy for me to see people and look at them as just like, you know, another living thing wandering around, or somebody who's in my way, between me and my next class.
Okay.
It's really easy to see people like that, like in all honesty, and maybe I'll share with one or two people or whatever, but like everybody else, that's how I viewed it. But that's not how Philip viewed them. When he saw the Samaritans, he didn't see, degenerates. He didn't see people whose ancestors disobeyed God. He saw lost sheep.
Yeah.
People who needed to know the love of Christ. And it was God's love for him that compelled him to reach out and share with these people and help them grow closer to God. Do you really understand the overwhelming power of the cross? Philip did. He knew it changed lives. And how do you view people?
Yeah.
Like, honestly, when you go to work and you're around your coworkers, are you just, phoning it in? Are you just, doing your work and checking out and going home and eating dinner and going to sleep? Is that what your life looks like? Or do you see people as lost sheep? I think it's cool. We get to see not only what Philip did, but we get to see what the result was. It said that many people were healed and their lives were changed forever. Paralyzed people, they could walk again. And I really like what it says at the end. For me, it's just really impacting. It says that the whole city, not one or two people, not a couple people, the whole city rejoiced when they received the gospel. And that is the impact of Christ's love on everybody. So for those of us who are disciples, harken back. Remember the time when you first heard the gospel. When you first heard about Jesus' sacrifice for you on the cross. What did that feel like? When you were first baptized, what were you feeling? How did you view the kingdom of God? How did you view lost people? I remember when I first became a Christian, actually, me and my brother Randy over there, brother from another mother. I remember we used to sit and we would plan how we were going to evangelize the world. I remember making plans about how I was going to sneak into North Korea and share the gospel with them because they need to hear the gospel, honestly. And I ignored the fact that I can't speak Korean and that I'm white as sour cream. I'd stand out like so I ignored that. I was like, who cares, man? They need to hear the gospel. And that's where I was at. But I think now it's been 8 years since I became a disciple, and now it's really easy for me to just kind of I'll obey it. I'll share my faith a little bit, but I'm going to go to class and I'm going to get a degree in engineering, and maybe I'll be an engineer, maybe not. I don't know what God has in store, but that passion. It's easy for it to drift away. And it's because it's so easy when you're jaded and I'm saying jaded, I'm only 20 years old. But when you've lived a life as a Christian for so long, it's easy to lose what's supposed to drive us and what's supposed to control us. And the point I'm making is this, that God's love and Jesus' sacrifice is so powerful that it drives out fear. Philip didn't fear persecution. He didn't fear ridicule from his brothers and sisters, or even how the Samaritans would treat him, because they're like, you guys have been mistreating us this whole time. But all he knew was one thing, which was the love of Christ.
Wow. Awesome.
Is that what drives us to do what we do? Are we driven by the love of Christ to reach out to people and to serve and help the poor? Or are we just doing it because we feel like we're supposed to? Or are we even doing it? That's another question.
Yeah, come on, Reese.
If you're visiting with us today and you haven't felt any of that, I'd encourage you to talk to the person who brought you out, because it's an incredible feeling, and it's something that we need to be driven by. And so, in closing, Philip really understood the power of Christ's love, and it's something that we all have. We have the gospel at our fingertips, and it is the most powerful thing in this world. More powerful than any weapon, any nuke, any culture, anything. It is the most powerful thing. And do we actually recognize that? Because unlike, I had insurmountable obstacles on my way to becoming an NFL player, and I didn't become an NFL player, and I certainly never would. But love can overcome everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Christ's love is that powerful.
Yes.
It doesn't matter your situation. It doesn't matter the persecution. It doesn't matter the culture that surrounds you. It doesn't matter bigotry, racism.
That's right.
Christ's love overcomes everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So live your life with the joy of the gospel
Amen.
and share that joy with others. It is the most powerful gift you can give to anyone. Thank you.
Yeah, let's get another round of applause for Dwight. You're doing something awesome. Yeah, I know for me, persecution is not something I look forward to. Like, oh yeah, let's go have hardship. You know? Usually I'm extremely dutiful and just like, okay, I'm gonna do my work, be done. So when Dwight was asking that question, you know, what comes to your mind when you're being persecuted? Do you have compassion on the people persecuting you? Or even like when Reese was talking about how he views the people around him, it's so easy for me to be judgmental and just see people as a hardship, you know. Oh, there's that, you know, immodest woman that's making my life hard. Oh, there's that guy who's worldly who's making my life hard, you know. It's like, do I actually care about them or do I just want them to get away from me, you know?
Come on, Michael.
So really consider how persecution can be used in your life, even though it's making your life really hard or someone else's life really hard. Consider how God can be using it. And how, specifically with that, how it can spread His word and actually do what we're meant here to do here. So yeah, definitely consider those questions. We're going to have some announcements. If you have kids, go ahead and go get them. Actually, wait, well, not yet. So listen to announcements first. My bad. All right, so first off, we have the camp fundraiser. All right, well, yeah, okay. So campus interns are going to be here. There's going to be about 30 of them this summer from May 4th to June 24th. And so we desperately need some people to step up and take them in. The internship does amazing things over the summer with, first off, just spreading the gospel, but also training up future leaders and the foundation of the future. So if you have a house that you can take in interns, please be willing to do that and talk to the FISCs about that. If you don't know who they are, ask around, you'll figure out. Beach Talk is coming Friday, May 25th. So definitely register for that. That's going to be for singles and upperclassmen campus. So it's going to be $60 until the 30th, and $50 for single parents and rising seniors, and campus students over 21, so yeah. And then next thing is our special admissions contribution. So you guys, we're at 12%. Doing great. So again, this is for India and the Caribbean. This one time of giving is going to pay for the entire year of the gospel being spread out there. So thinking about persecution, you know, this is a time for us to be really sacrificing and help them spread the gospel in the face of their persecution. So again, yeah, if you want to, also if you go to headchurch.com, you can find other ways to give online as well. So with that, I'm going to pray, and then parents can go get your kids, and then we'll have one last song. God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you so much for allowing us to have awesome campus brothers who can preach your word and do it with conviction, God. Thank you so much for this church and that it has already been spread through persecution, and we can continue to see persecution as an opportunity to be out of ourselves and to do things we don't want to do and spread your mission, God. I pray that we can have you as our focus and specifically your love, that we're not doing things out of obligation, but because you love us and you have already done so much for us. In your name we pray, amen.
All right, one last announcement. Sorry, guys. May 5th is Teen Prom, exactly. So, and graduation. Yes, and graduation. So, what that means is the teens and the campus on May 6th will not be here. They will be having their own service at ODU, right? ODU! So, on on May 6th, it will be the rest of the Southside regions, both Tidewater, Coastal, and South Beach. We will all be meeting here at 10 o'clock. I know, it's a little different for us. 10 o'clock here on May 6th. All right, again, the campus and teams will be having their own service at ODU, and everybody else will be meeting here at 10 a.m. Thank you. If you have kids in kids ministry, feel free to give them at this time.
Amen. As we continue on with the finish up our service with a fitting song, Rise Up, O Man of God, to go coincide with the message today. So please stand as we finish off God's service. Rise up, O man of God, have done with lesser things. Give heart and mind and soul and strength to serve the King of Kings. Rise up, O man of God, the kingdom tarries long. Bring in the day of brotherhood and in the night of wrong. Rise up, O man of God, the church for you doth wait. Her strength unequal to her task, rise up and make her great. Lift high the cross of Christ, tread where his feet have trod. As brothers of the Son of Man, rise up, O man of God. Rise up, O man of God. Amen. You're dismissed.
No, you good. You good.